The air is thick with silence, heavy like a presence you can almost touch. Imagine walking through a corridor of forgotten ruins, torchlight flickering across walls etched with markings no scholar can explain. You feel watched not by the living but by something older, patient, and waiting. Some mysteries never rest. They cling to the earth like shadows that refuse to fade. And tonight, we will awaken them. From cursed caves sealed for millennia, to ancient artifacts that whisper of impossible knowledge, to entire civilizations that vanished without leaving a sound. This is a descent into 20 of the creepiest ancient mysteries humanity has ever uncovered. Each one, stranger, darker, and more unsettling than the last. These are stories that will not just fascinate you, they will haunt you. Forever, the desert wind cuts across the plateau, carrying with it the sting of dust and forgotten centuries. Beneath your feet, stone foundations stretch across the barren earth, the remains of a vast city long consumed by time. Few travelers ever find their way here, to Shimao, a fortress in northern China, lost for more than 3,000 years. It was once the largest city of its age, its walls soaring, its towers bristling with power. But Shimao is not remembered for its glory. It is remembered for something darker, something that still clings to its stones like the echo of a scream. For when archaeologists began peeling back the layers of its ruins, they did not just find walls of stone. They found walls of bone. Human skulls, hundreds of them, set into the very foundations of Shimao's fortresses. The first sight alone was chilling, empty eye sockets staring from the mortar, as though the city itself had been built to watch. Whispers spread quickly. Who were these people? Why were their skulls entombed here? Were they honored or defiled? Were they guardians or victims? The first theories suggested ritual sacrifice captives from enemy tribes, slaughtered to bless the construction of walls. In many ancient cultures, blood was spilled when great monuments were raised. But the sheer number of skulls at Shimao shocked even the most seasoned archaeologists. These were not a handful of victims. This was an entire population, woven into stone. And then came the discovery that changed everything. The skulls weren't simply buried in the walls. They were glued. Resin had been used, deliberately, carefully, to fuse human bone into palace foundations. The choice was not accidental. This was not about quick disposal. This was architecture laced with death, engineered to last, engineered to haunt. What kind of ruler, what kind of kingdom would build its grandeur on such cruelty? The city of Shimao rose in the late Stone Age, around 2000 BCE, during a time of upheaval and transition. As other cultures were just beginning to form fragile settlements, Shimao exploded into existence with massive stone ramparts, ceremonial platforms, and palaces that sprawled for miles. It was a metropolis before its time, but one without writing, without records, without a voice to explain itself. All we have are the bones, and those bones speak of terror. Forensic analysis revealed most of the skulls belonged to young women. Many were teenagers, some barely past childhood. Their lives ended violently. No grave goods accompanied them, no signs of honor. They were not buried, but displayed. Their death was not an end, it was turned into a message carved into the walls themselves. But to whom was the message directed? Some scholars argue the skulls were a form of psychological warfare. To approaching enemies, the fortress walls themselves would have seemed alive with the faces of the conquered. Each hollow gaze a warning. This is what awaits you if you dare challenge us. In this view, Shimao was a city-state built on fear, its stones a constant broadcast of brutality. Yet others see a different story. Perhaps these were not enemies, but sacrifices offered by Shimao's own people, chosen victims, bound into the foundations as offerings to gods or spirits. In many ancient traditions, buildings were consecrated with life. The walls literally fed with souls to keep them strong. A tomb, a palace, a temple, all demanded payment in blood. At Shimao, the scale of that payment may have been unparalleled. Still others whisper of a third possibility, that the skulls were not victims at all, but guardians. That resin bound them in place not as desecration, but as protection. To hold the walls firm, to anchor restless spirits, to tie the living and the dead into a single fortress. Whatever the truth, the effect remains the same. Walking Shimao's ruins today is like walking through a graveyard disguised as a city. The stones seem to breathe with the memory of suffering, as if cruelty itself has been fossilized. But the story of Shimao does not end with its walls. At its center, archaeologists uncovered a sprawling palace complex, filled with carvings of serpents, monsters, and hybrid beasts, visions drawn from fever dreams. Unlike other cities of its age, Shimao's rulers did not build symbols of harmony or prosperity. They carved fear into stone. Some walls still bear traces of paint reds, blacks, and yellows colors of fire, blood, and earth. And beneath these palaces lay tombs. One in particular drew whispers from the excavation team, the resting place of a figure who may have been Shimao's shaman king. His tomb was filled with jade, tiger teeth, and blades of stone. But the most unsettling detail was what surrounded him. Layers of human remains, sacrifices to accompany him into death. Some were whole skeletons, others dismembered parts. It was as if his very burial was designed to remind the world that his power extended beyond life. Even in death, he ruled with fear. The deeper archaeologists dug, the stranger the picture became. In one chamber, walls were painted with spirals that seemed to twist as light flickered across them, dizzying, almost hypnotic. In another, pits filled with burnt bones suggested fire rituals, perhaps meant to commune with gods or ancestors. And scattered throughout were jade daggers, ceremonial yet sharp, their edges stained with traces of what once may have been blood. The evidence suggested a society ruled not only by kingship but by ritual terror, where politics and religion merged into something darker, something that blurred the line between devotion and domination. And then came the haunting thought: if this was how they built their walls, what did they build their lives upon? As with all mysteries, the answers remain elusive. Shimao's civilization eventually collapsed, its palaces abandoned, its walls reduced to rubble. No chronicles tell us why. Did enemies finally breach its skull-lined ramparts? Did famine, drought, or rebellion turn the city against itself? Or did the gods demand too much, draining the life of a people who had given everything until nothing remained but bones and stone? Today, the ruins lie silent on the plateau. Tourists who venture there describe an atmosphere unlike any other ruin in China, heavy, unsettling, as if unseen eyes follow them among the crumbling walls. Some claim the wind itself seems to whisper through the gaps where skulls once Saturday, and when moonlight strikes the stones, it is said you can almost make out faces, still the faint curve of an eye socket, the jagged grin of ancient teeth. They are not ghosts in the ordinary sense. They are worse. They are part of the architecture, fused into eternity. Shimao stands as a city built not just of stone and mortar, but of lives. A city where cruelty was carved as deep as the foundations. A city where death became construction material. Even now, thousands of years later, fragments of bone still peer through crumbling walls. They do not move, they do not speak, but they watch. Silent witnesses to a kingdom that believed fear was stronger than stone. And perhaps they are still watching. Beneath the sands of Mesopotamia, in the cradle of civilization, lies a city older than memory, Ur. Once it gleamed with ziggurats that touched the heavens, markets buzzing with life, and temples filled with incense smoke that curled like prayers toward the gods. But beneath this city of prosperity lies something far darker: pits, where the silence of death still clings to the bones of those who entered them willingly, or perhaps unwillingly. When archaeologists first opened the royal graves of Ur in the 1922, they expected treasures, golden masks, and glittering jewelry. They found all of that and more. But what froze their breath was not the gold, but the bodies. Dozens upon dozens of skeletons arranged in haunting order, lying beside their king and queen. They had cups of poison near their lips, instruments in their hands, as if they had accompanied their ruler into eternity. But did they? Were these attendants stepping proudly into the afterlife? Their loyalty so absolute that death itself could not sever it? Or were they led here under a darker command, a ritual where choice did not exist? Some archaeologists thought it was simple loyalty made flesh, devotion so fierce it conquered mortality. But as excavators brushed away the dust from skulls, faint cracks appeared in the story, literal cracks. Several skulls bore signs of blunt force trauma. Some were fractured as though struck by a hammer, suggesting the poison may not have been swallowed willingly. Perhaps it failed, or perhaps the attendants resisted, and in that final moment, violence forced them into their eternal slumber. The deeper they dug, the stranger it became. In one chamber, musicians were buried still clutching their lyres, as though ordered to provide melodies for the afterlife. Others lay adorned in jewelry, their final sleep arranged in perfect patterns like actors frozen mid-performance in a ritual play staged for gods and kings. But the question remains, were these rituals beautiful acts of devotion or brutal massacres cloaked in ceremony? Imagine the scene thousands of years ago. The king dies, and the air grows thick with incense. The attendants file into the pit, perhaps singing hymns, perhaps trembling in silence. One by one, they raise their cups. Did they truly drink? Or did the priests ensure their silence another way? The truth is buried with them. And yet, the silence of the pits is not empty. Every skeleton, every cracked skull, every lyre string snapped in death whispers a contradiction, love and fear, devotion and violence. These chambers of royalty are also chambers of doubt, echoing with one terrible possibility, that the glory of kings was built on the unwilling blood of their people. The death pits of Ur remind us of an ancient truth, one as old as civilization itself, that the cost of power has always been paid in flesh. And tonight, when the desert winds sweep across the ruins, rattling the stones, it is easy to imagine the faint echo of a lyre playing still, a song for kings, and for those who had no choice but to follow them. Teotihuacan, the city of the gods. Even its name is shrouded in mystery, given by the Aztecs long after the city had already crumbled into ruin. They called it the place where men became gods. But within this sprawling city of pyramids, markets, and avenues, one structure rises above all others in menace and beauty, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. Its facade is carved with rows of fanged serpents and other deities, their stone eyes wide, their jaws forever frozen mid-bite. Standing before it is like staring into a wall of myth, each serpent head staring back with a silent, eternal hunger. Yet what lies beneath this temple is stranger still, a world hidden under the stone, a labyrinth that seems to open into the very underworld itself. In 2003, a heavy rainstorm caused the ground near the temple to collapse, revealing the entrance to a tunnel sealed for nearly 2 millennia. Archaeologists descended into the earth, torches in hand, stepping into a passage no human had walked since the city's final days. What they found was staggering. A corridor stretching hundreds of feet beneath the pyramid, its walls and ceilings dusted with pyrite, the mineral known as fool's gold. In the glow of their lamps, the pyrite shimmered like a field of stars, as if the explorers had stumbled not beneath the earth but into the night sky itself. Was this tunnel meant to mimic the cosmos? Or was it a map, a mirror of heaven carved into the heart of stone? Deeper still, chambers opened, filled with offerings so strange they seemed almost theatrical. Seashells brought from faraway oceans, jade masks with empty eyes, and sculptures of jaguars poised to strike. But the most unnerving discovery was not the pyrite stars, nor the carved effigies, it was the mercury. Pools of liquid metal glimmered in the torchlight, slick and dangerous. The mercury had been poured deliberately, pooled in basins and channels, shimmering like mirrors that refuse to hold a reflection. In the ancient world, mercury was rare, difficult to obtain, and deeply toxic. Why would priests of Teotihuacan risk death to collect it, store it, and guard it beneath their most sacred temple? Some archaeologists believe the mercury symbolized rivers of the underworld, shimmering pathways for spirits to cross. Others think it was meant to act as a portal itself, liquid mirrors through which the priests could commune with gods, or perhaps even enter other realms. Imagine a chamber lit by flickering firelight, the mercury glowing in the dark like molten silver, and a priest in a feathered headdress chanting as he gazed into its surface. To him, it would not be poison. It would be prophecy. And yet, mercury kills, slowly, invisibly. Its fumes invade the lungs, its touch poisons the blood. The priests who poured it, who stood above it, who breathed it in during rituals, may have felt its effects without ever understanding. Tremors, madness, visions, all symptoms of mercury poisoning. Could the ecstasies of their ceremonies, the visions of gods and monsters, have been the byproduct of this poison? Were they glimpsing divine realms, or the hallucinations of their dying minds? The temple of the feathered serpent grows stranger still when we consider the sacrifices. Excavations revealed mass graves beneath its stones, over 100 bound warriors, buried alive or killed in rituals. Their hands tied, their skulls marked, they became eternal guardians of the temple. And all of this starry tunnels, liquid mercury, human offerings points to a civilization obsessed not just with death, but with what lay beyond it. Teotihuacan's people vanished long before the Aztecs arrived. Their language is unknown, their rulers nameless, their myths only fragments. But standing in that tunnel, staring into mercury pools, one truth becomes clear. They believed the underworld was not a metaphor. It was real, and it could be reached. Through pyrite stars, through poison rivers, through sacrifice and ritual. When you stand above the temple today, the sun blazing down on the stone serpents, you cannot see the mercury. It lies hidden, glimmering in the darkness, untouched by centuries, still toxic, still deadly, a substance meant for gods, not men, a mirror not of our faces, but of eternity. And so the question lingers. What did the priests of Teotihuacan see in those silver pools? Did they see gods, or only themselves? Did they unlock a door, or did they drown in illusions? The mercury still waits, silent and patient. It does not decay, it does not fade. It gleams as it did 2,000 years ago, a forbidden mirror in a temple built for gods, dangerous to touch but eternal to behold. And if the underworld truly has doors, perhaps one of them still lies open beneath the feathered serpent, glimmering in darkness, waiting for someone foolish or brave enough to step through. High in the Indian Himalayas, where the air thins and silence presses against the ears, lies a lake that seems like a scar in the mountain's skin, Rupkund, a shallow pool of ice and snow, ringed by jagged cliffs and eternal clouds. For most of the year, it is frozen solid, a mirror of white beneath the endless sky. But when the summer sun softens its grip and the ice begins to melt, the lake reveals what it has been hiding. Bones. Hundreds of them. Skulls, femurs, ribs, scattered like dice across the stones, some still half embedded in the slush. Imagine stumbling upon it for the first time. You crest a ridge, exhausted from the climb, and there, instead of peace, instead of beauty, you find a charnel lake, its water dark and still, littered with the remains of the long dead. Travelers have called it cursed. Shepherds whisper that it is haunted. And even today, locals say the gods themselves struck down those who rest in its waters. For years, the skeletons of Rupkund remained a mystery. Who were these people? Stranded so high in the mountains, far from villages or trade routes. Why had they died in such numbers, their bones left exposed to the sky? Some believed they were an army that had perished in battle, driven into the mountains and slaughtered by the cold. Others whispered they were traders or pilgrims caught in a sudden blizzard. But then came the twist that made the lake even stranger. DNA analysis revealed that the skeletons were not all from the same time. Some dated back to the 9th century, others to the 19th. 1,000 years apart, yet their bones lay side by side, as though the lake itself had been calling them, century after century, to the same frozen grave. Who returns to die in the same place, across generations, and why? One legend speaks of a goddess, enraged by pilgrims who defiled her mountain. She rained death upon them in the form of hailstones, as hard as iron, cracking skulls and crushing bodies. Indeed, some of the skeletons bear marks of blunt trauma on their heads, wounds not from battle but from the sky itself falling ice, massive and merciless. Science seems to echo myth. The lake's dead may have been struck down by a storm so violent it turned the heavens into a weapon. And yet, the DNA results tell another story. The dead are not from a single lineage or tribe. Some came from South Asia, others from the Mediterranean. Foreigners, separated by time, somehow drawn to the same cursed water. Pilgrims, perhaps, who believed that dying here ensured salvation. Or wanderers who lost their way and became offerings to the mountain whether they wished it or not. Every summer, when the ice recedes, new bones rise from the water. They surface as though the lake itself is unwilling to let them rest. Visitors describe the eerie sound of bones clattering against stone when the wind stirs the surface. The mountain remembers, and it does not forgive. Today, Rupkund is still a place of pilgrimage. Trekkers climb its brutal slopes, some in awe, others in dread, to look upon the skeletons. Some bring offerings, some leave in silence. But the question lingers in the thin, icy air. Why this lake? Why these deaths, spread across centuries, yet bound to a single place? Perhaps the lake chose them. Perhaps the mountain demands a price, paid over and over again. And as the glaciers retreat, as the ice grows thinner with each passing decade, more bones will emerge. The lake will continue to give up its dead, one season at a time, as if reminding the living that the past is never buried, and the mountain never forgets. When you stand at its edge and look into the dark water, you may see your reflection. Or perhaps, if the light shifts just so, you may see a skull rise beneath you, waiting its turn to surface, waiting to remind you that the lake remembers every death and will not stop until the last story has been told. In the remote highlands of northern Peru, where cliffs plunge into valleys and clouds drift like ghosts across jagged ridges, a haunting sight emerges from the stone. Carved into ledges hundreds of feet above the ground stand towering figures, pale and skeletal, staring endlessly into the void below. These are the sarcophagi of Carajilla, mummified guardians placed high in the cliffs by the Chachapoya people, a civilization so enigmatic that the Incas called them the Cloud People. Each sarcophagus is over 8 feet tall, shaped like a human figure. Their elongated heads are painted with ochre, their torsos broad and stiff, and their hollow eyes forever gazing across the valleys. At first glance, they look like statues watchers frozen in place. But inside, carefully wrapped and preserved, are the remains of the dead. Why here? Why so high, so unreachable? To place a sarcophagus at Carajilla was no simple feat. These cliffs are sheer walls of stone, nearly impossible to climb without ropes, ladders, and scaffolding. Yet the Chachapoya somehow hauled enormous figures, packed with mummies, high into the cliffs where even birds hesitate to nest. Imagine the ritual, the slow ascent, the chanting of priests, the crowd below watching as their ancestors were placed into the sky itself. Was it devotion or fear? For centuries, the sarcophagi stood untouched, a line of guardians gazing into eternity. But when modern archaeologists first investigated them, they found something unsettling. Some sarcophagi contained not just a single mummy, but 2, human and animal together. Llamas, birds, even small dogs interred beside their masters. These were not ordinary burials. They were unions, human and beast, sealed together as if companionship was needed beyond death, or as if sacrifice was demanded to ensure protection. The more the researchers uncovered, the stranger the story became. These sarcophagi were not merely tombs, they were warnings. Their placement high in the cliffs made them visible for miles, as though the dead themselves had been turned into sentinels, forever watching the valleys, guarding the living from enemies or from darker forces unseen. The Chachapoya did not hide their dead underground. They elevated them, making death itself part of the landscape. But time is cruel. Many of the sarcophagi have been shattered by earthquakes. Some toppled and fell, smashing on the rocks below, spilling bones and fragments of painted plaster. Others were looted, their contents stolen. And yet, even broken, the figures remain. White faces with empty eyes still cling to the cliffs, gazing outward, their expressions cracked but unyielding. Stand beneath them, and you feel the weight of their presence. The valley is silent but for the wind, carrying whispers that seem to pass directly from those hollow eyes. You realize the Chachapoya achieved something extraordinary. They made their dead eternal. Not forgotten, not hidden, but ever present. Guardians carved against the sky, defying both time and rain. And so they remain, perched above the abyss, their hollow eyes wide, their bodies crumbling but not gone. They watch as clouds drift and storms rage, as centuries pass and civilizations vanish. They are not just the dead of a forgotten people. They are watchers, sentinels, reminders that some cultures saw death not as an end but as a duty. The sarcophagi of Karagia may crack, may crumble, but their vigil endures. And if you stand in the valley below, their gaze is inescapable. The cloud people may be gone, but their guardians still wait, rain and time unable to erase their eternal watch. In the summer of 1986, farmers in China's Sichuan province dug into the earth, searching for clay to repair a kiln. Their shovels struck something hard. At first, it looked like ordinary stone, but as they brushed away the soil, strange shapes emerged, fragments of bronze, shards of gold, objects so alien they seemed to come from another world. What they had unearthed was the edge of one of the most baffling archaeological discoveries of the 20th century, the ruins of Sanxingdui. Beneath the farmland lay two massive pits, filled with thousands of artifacts. Masks, statues, and ritual objects unlike anything seen before in Chinese history. But what startled the world most were the faces masks of hammered gold, eyes bulging outward, mouths agape in a frozen scream. Some had exaggerated ears, others sharp noses, still others stretched mouths that seemed caught in an eternal howl. These were not the serene ancestors of the Shang dynasty, nor the familiar motifs of early China. They belonged to no known dynasty, no recorded lineage. It was as though another civilization had risen in parallel, and then been erased so thoroughly that all memory of it was lost. Who were the people of Sanxingdui, and why did they carve faces that still feel alive, still feel haunted? The masks were immense. Some measured over a meter wide, hammered from sheets of gold that shimmered in the firelight of ceremonies. Their eyes bulged as though straining to see beyond the human world, into realms of gods and spirits. Their mouths, open and twisted, seemed to be mid-cry either of ecstasy or terror. Archaeologists who first gazed upon them described an uncanny sensation, as though they were staring into something not meant for human eyes. And yet, the story grew stranger. For these treasures, so carefully crafted, were not hidden away for preservation. They were smashed. The masks bore deliberate breaks, their features shattered before being placed into the pits. Bronze trees with delicate branches were snapped. Jade objects were broken into fragments. Ivory tusks were piled and burned. It was not looting. It was ritual destruction. A civilization taking its own treasures, its own gods, and destroying them before burial. But why? Some scholars believe Sanxingdui was performing a rite of closure, sealing away the power of their deities by breaking their images. Others suspect conquest and invader, forcing the people to destroy their own sacred objects as an act of submission. But there is a darker possibility still, that the people of Sanxingdui destroyed their idols themselves in fear of what they had unleashed. The eyes of the masks are the key. They are enormous, wide, exaggerated beyond proportion. They are eyes not of men, but of watchers. Did these masks represent gods the Sanxingdui feared, or visions that their priests had seen, visions they wished to never see again? Some of the statues depict figures holding strange ritual vessels, as though channeling something through them. Were they summoning spirits, or binding them? One statue, larger than life, depicts a man standing upright, his arms stretched forward, once gripping an object now lost. His expression is stern, his body rigid, his gaze fixed. Was he a king, a priest, or something more symbolic, a vessel for a god to inhabit? Standing before him today, in the museum where he rests, one feels the weight of ritual, of ceremonies whose meanings are long forgotten but whose power is still palpable. And then there is the mystery of their disappearance. After centuries of flourishing, the Sanxingdui civilization vanished. No records describe their fall. Their cities were abandoned. Their language, if they had one written, is lost. All that remains are these shattered idols, staring blankly from the dirt. Some believe they were destroyed by earthquakes or floods, forcing survivors to migrate and merge with other peoples. Others think their destruction was intentional, that the civilization did not collapse, but chose to bury itself, erasing its gods, its images, even its name. Imagine it, a final ritual in which priests carried golden masks and bronze idols, marched into the pits, and one by one destroyed them, hammering the faces of their gods, snapping the branches of their sacred trees, smashing the jaws of their spirit animals, then burying them deep, covering them in ash and soil, sealing them away from future generations. It was as though they wanted to ensure these faces would never be worshipped again. These eyes would never gaze upon the living. And yet, despite their efforts, the idols rose again, unearthed by chance, their shattered forms assembled and displayed, their eyes meeting ours once more. The people of Sanxingdui tried to erase themselves from history, but in doing so, they left behind fragments that are even more haunting. Today, when visitors enter the Sanxingdui Museum, they often stop in silence before the golden mask. Its empty eyes gleam under the lights, its scream eternal. Stand long enough, and the lines blur. Is it laughing? Crying? What is certain is this: the Sanxingdui civilization was advanced, capable of artistry that rivaled any empire of its time. Yet, they vanished without leaving a name, a word, a story. All we have are these faces, frozen in screams, broken yet indestructible. The mystery remains unresolved, and perhaps that is what makes it most powerful. We do not know who they were, what gods they worshipped, or why they destroyed themselves. But we know this: their fragments have survived. Their stares have crossed time itself. And whether they meant to or not, the Sanxingdui left us with one eternal image: the face of a scream that refuses to die. So when you gaze into those hollow eyes, ask yourself, are you staring at the face of a forgotten god, or at the echo of a people who tried and failed to silence their own past? The mask's empty stares are all that remain. Rain, time, and even the will of their makers could not erase them. They watch still, their screams caught in bronze and gold, haunting forever the silence of history. In 1848, along the banks of the Zbruch River, in what is now western Ukraine, peasants stumbled upon something extraordinary. At first, it seemed like a simple stone column, heavy and weathered, half buried in mud. But as more of it emerged from the earth, the shape became clearer. This was no ordinary pillar, it was a sculpture carved in 3 distinct tiers, with 4 solemn faces staring outward in different directions. Standing over 8 feet tall, the idol radiated an eerie presence. The villagers who unearthed it felt uneasy. They whispered among themselves that it was a remnant of the old gods, those banished centuries earlier when Christianity had swept through the region. Some refused to touch it at all, convinced that disturbing the idol would bring death. Yet curiosity won. The statue was hauled up from the riverbank and, slowly, its details revealed themselves. On its uppermost tier, 4 faces gazed outward, serene but haunting, like guardians of the 4 winds. Below, carved figures depicted arms, belts, and offerings, while the lowest tier showed smaller human forms crouched, as if bearing the weight of the divine above them. This was the Zeebrugge idol, one of the very few surviving relics of the Slavic pagan religion, a belief system systematically destroyed during the Christianization of Kievan Ruses in the 10th century. Its discovery opened a doorway into a forgotten world of gods, rituals, and mysteries. But it also carried with it a shadow, a curse said to cling to those who dared disturb it. Before Christianity reshaped Eastern Europe, the Slavic peoples worshipped a pantheon of gods tied to nature, fertility, war, and the cycles of life and death. Unlike the marble Olympians of Greece or the gilded statues of Egypt, the Slavic deities were rarely immortalized in stone. Their temples were often wooden shrines or sacred groves, their idols carved from timber that rotted with time. This makes the Zeebrugge idol all the more extraordinary. Carved in limestone, it has endured nearly a millennium underground, surviving conquests, floods, and deliberate erasure. Scholars believe it may represent Svarozhich or Svetovid, gods of war, abundance, and prophecy. The 4 faces are thought to symbolize the all-seeing gaze of divinity, looking to the north, south, east, and west, nothing hidden, everything witnessed. The 3 tiers may embody a cosmic order. The upper world, gods and heavens. The middle world, humans and earthly life. The underworld, spirits, ancestors, and the dead. In its design, the idol compresses an entire theology into a single stone, a world tree in sculpted form, binding together sky, earth, and the depths below. But if this god once commanded devotion, why was it buried in a river? When Prince Vladimir of Kiev decreed the Christianization of Rus in 988 CE, he ordered the destruction of pagan idols. Chroniclers describe statues being toppled, broken, and hurled into rivers as acts of symbolic cleansing. The message was clear. The old gods had been defeated, drowned, their power washed away by baptismal waters. The Zeebrugge idol seems to have suffered this fate. Scholars believe it was deliberately thrown into the river by converts, perhaps as a final act of banishment, or as protection against its lingering influence. Yet, ironically, that watery grave preserved it, shielding it from later wars and looting. For centuries it lay forgotten, face down in mud and silt, until peasants hauling sand accidentally uncovered it. To them, the idol was not just an archaeological curiosity, but a dangerous relic of forbidden worship, and soon after its discovery, whispers of misfortune began. Folklore tells that those who first tried to move the Zeebrugge idol fell ill. Some accounts claim that within weeks of handling it, one man died suddenly of fever, another was thrown from his horse and killed, while others reported strange dreams filled with voices. Whether coincidence or not, villagers began to speak of the idol as the cursed stone. The fear was not unfounded. In many cultures, pagan statues and sacred relics were believed to retain spiritual force long after their cults had ended. To touch them carelessly was to invite the wrath of the gods, gods jealous of their abandonment, eager to remind mortals of their presence. Christian priests, too, fed into this fear. For them, the idol was a demon in disguise, a relic of heathen superstition. To them, its survival was an affront to the true faith. And yet, not destroy it. Instead, it was passed from hand to hand, studied, preserved, displayed, and wherever it went, tales of accidents and strange occurrences followed. What makes the Zeebrugge idol so unnerving is not only its history but its design. Unlike most single-face statues, its four gazes mean you cannot stand before it without being seen. Step to the side, and another face is already turned toward you. Circle around, and the idol always meets your eye. This unblinking attention gave rise to superstitions. Farmers who visited museums where it was displayed reported feeling dizzy or ill after staring too long. Some claimed the idol's faint carved smile seemed to shift, widening when no one else was looking. Others swore that photographs of the idol sometimes developed with distortions, faces blurred, shadows where none should be. Though such stories may be dismissed as imagination, they echo an old truth. The Zeebrugge idol was never meant to be inert art. It was a living object of worship, charged with rituals, blood sacrifices, and prayers. To remove it from its sacred context and place it under glass may have stripped its power or trapped it, simmering, waiting. Archaeologists view the idol as an invaluable key to understanding early Slavic religion. Yet historians and folklorists also treat it as a bridge between the historical record and the world of myth. Its survival, they argue, is not mere chance. For some, it is proof that memory cannot be erased so easily. Even in modern Ukraine and Poland, the Zeebrugge idol has taken on symbolic meaning. Some neo-pagan groups revere it as a surviving totem of their ancestors' beliefs, a beacon of identity reclaimed. Others warn that venerating it invites darkness. The tension mirrors the original conflict: Christianity versus paganism, order versus chaos, forgetting versus remembering. And perhaps that is the idol's true power, not in curses or accidents, but in its ability to provoke unease, to resist closure. It is neither wholly dead nor fully alive. It simply endures, smiling faintly through centuries, untouched by time. Today, the Zeebrugge idol resides in the Archaeological Museum of Kraków, Poland. Tourists who encounter it often feel the same chill reported by those first villagers. Surrounded by quiet display cases, the tall limestone column looms with an unsettling presence. Children often tug at their parents' sleeves, asking, "Why does it have four faces?" Adults linger, trying to interpret its symbols. Some step away quickly, uneasy under its gaze. Others return again and again, unable to look away. Behind its glass, the idol is safe, but its story is not finished. The Christian chroniclers who mocked it are gone. The peasants who feared it are gone. Yet the idol remains, stone lips curved in that eternal half-smile, as if amused by the passing of centuries. And still the stories linger, of sudden deaths, of curses, of dreams that come after seeing it. Whether those are products of imagination or whispers from the underworld, no one can say for certain. What is clear is this: the Zeebrugge idol is not forgotten. It still commands attention, still unsettles, still whispers across time. The four faces of the Zeebrugge idol, carved nearly 1,000 years ago, have watched the rise and fall of empires, the drowning of faiths, the burial of memory. They have stared through mud and water, through candlelight and electric bulbs, through superstition and science. It was meant to be destroyed, yet it endures. It was meant to be silenced, yet people still speak of it. Its faint smile is unchanged, a reminder that the old gods, whether real, imagined, or somewhere in between, are never fully gone. Even now, in a quiet museum hall, the idol waits. Its watchers are gone, its worshippers gone, its enemies gone, but its eyes remain, fixed on the living. And those who stand before it feel, if only for a moment, the same unease as those villagers by the Zeebrugge River, the sense that the stone is watching, remembering, judging. The idol was buried, but it was never defeated. High on the wind-swept plains of southern Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates weave their ancient paths, archaeologists unearthed a mystery that would chill even the most seasoned scholars. Buried beneath layers of sand, clay, and centuries of forgotten life, They discovered small clay figurines, simple at first glance, yet utterly alien. These were the Ubaid figurines, dating back some 7,000 years, crafted by a civilization older than the pyramids, older than Sumer itself. At first, one might think of them as mundane, clay sculptures of humans, women perhaps, carrying infants or worshipping at shrines. But a closer look reveals something far stranger. Their faces are elongated, their skulls unnaturally stretched, their eyes small, slit-like, or strangely reptilian, staring blankly as though through time itself. Some have scaled torsos, thin, elongated limbs, even claws etched in fine detail. The Ubaid figurines do not resemble humans. They resemble something else entirely. What were these beings? Gods? Spirits? Or entities that no one alive has ever truly seen? Among the most unsettling finds were female figures holding infants. But these were not ordinary infants. Some were hybrids, part human, part lizard, part something that defies definition. Mothers cradle these children with solemn care, their expressions impassive, eyes wide and unblinking, as though they were performing a sacred duty known only to themselves and the beings they worshipped. The scene is both tender and horrific. The maternal gesture suggests devotion, love, even protection. But the alien features the elongated skulls, the reptilian torsos, the strange proportions evoke something uncanny, almost demonic. These figurines blur the line between worship and fear, between devotion and terror. Were the Ubaid people venerating these beings as gods? Or were they terrified, offering homage to creatures that might harm them if ignored? Some researchers propose that these figures were ritual objects, used to communicate with the spiritual world, to invoke protection, fertility, or guidance. But what if they were memories of real encounters, distorted over time into myth and clay? The thought is unsettling. A people who lived alongside beings not entirely human, whose memory lingers in the silent eyes of these tiny statues. The most haunting feature of the figurines is their eyes. Tiny slits, hollowed sockets, or wide, staring orbs that seem to follow you across a room. Archaeologists describe a profound unease when examining them, an almost physical sensation of being watched. Some scientists suggest this is psychological, a product of our innate fear of the uncanny, but the effect is undeniable. These eyes are not passive. Even in clay, they hold an intent. They observe. They remember. Some figurines have perforations where the eyes should be, as if to hold inlaid stones that would have gleamed in candlelight, enhancing the illusion of life. Others show subtle asymmetry, suggesting the artist intended to evoke emotion, awareness, or even dread. And the children, with their hybrid features, add another layer of incomprehensible meaning. The future, the divine, or the abomination cradled in human hands. What do we make of the hybrid infants? Across the Ubaid culture, multiple examples appear. Humans with elongated heads or reptilian features, often depicted in the arms of adult female figurines. These hybrids are consistent in style, suggesting they were not accidental mutations but deliberate representations. Some theorists propose these were symbolic, allegories for divine intervention or interbreeding myths. Others suggest the hybrids might reflect actual beings observed by the Ubaid people, recorded in clay as faithfully as possible. In a world lost to time, we may never know which interpretation is correct. The duality of these figurines, human and alien, maternal and monstrous, evokes a profound tension. They simultaneously comfort and horrify, like a lullaby that contains hidden screams. To the modern eye, the Ubaid figurines pose a challenge. Are they purely symbolic, the products of a human imagination grappling with mortality and the unknown? Or are they echoes of a reality that has long been forgotten? Some suggest the figures were used in ritualized worship of otherworldly ancestors, beings who once walked the earth before humanity rose to dominance. Others argue they were spiritual intermediaries, vessels to communicate with deities, protect homes, or ensure fertility. But the most unsettling interpretation is the simplest, that these beings were real. The Ubaid people may have lived alongside something that was not human, yet existed in our world. If so, the figurines are not merely art, they are eyewitness testimony, frozen in clay for 7 millennia. Excavations at sites like Eridu, Tel al-Ubaid, and other settlements across southern Mesopotamia revealed hundreds of figurines. Many were broken intentionally, as though ritually deactivated. Some were buried in households, others in temple precincts. Clay, once soft and pliable, hardened into eternal witnesses. Analysis shows consistent features across sites: elongated skulls, slitted eyes, unusual limb proportions, and hybrid infants. The craftsmanship is sophisticated. Even in their alienness, these figurines are anatomically deliberate, reflecting the same proportions, the same exaggerations, across hundreds of miles. The uniformity implies a shared belief system or knowledge, a culture-wide recognition of beings that do not appear in ordinary human experience. The Ubaid people may have feared these entities, worshipped them, or both, and they immortalized them, forever staring from the clay with eyes that do not forget. The figurines' alien features have captivated modern audiences. UFO enthusiasts and ancient astronaut theorists point to them as evidence of prehistoric encounters with non-human intelligences. Skeptics dismiss them as symbolic exaggerations, yet even without speculation, the figurines retain a haunting power. Consider this. For 7,000 years, these clay beings have stared silently into emptiness. Mothers clutch hybrid infants, their gestures protective, solemn, precise. The humans who molded them are gone. Empires rose and fell, rivers changed course. Yet these figurines endure, immortalized in ritual and mystery, challenging the line between myth and memory. When viewed today, they provoke questions that remain unanswered. Did the Ubaid people truly encounter beings that were not human? Were these objects meant to warn, to protect, or to remember? And if such creatures existed once, where did they go? The figurines provide no answers, only observation. They are witnesses to an ancient time when humanity shared the world with something other, or perhaps only imagined it in ways that still haunt our collective psyche. When the Ubaid figurines are displayed in museums or carefully preserved in storage, one can almost sense their gaze. The elongated skulls and reptilian eyes seem to follow observers, not with malice, but with quiet insistence. They ask the same question across millennia: where does myth end and memory begin? The hybrid infants remain cradled in maternal hands, neither fully human nor fully alien, suspended between worlds. They are reminders that our ancestors may have known more than we think, that their imagination, their fears, their experiences, recorded in clay, were more profound and unsettling than any written chronicle can convey. And so the demon spirits of Ubaid linger, silent yet eternal, staring across the centuries, asking us to consider what lies beyond human understanding, what truths are buried beneath sand, and what nightmares once walked beside us. In the cold quiet of a museum or the dusty shelves of an archaeological dig, their blank, reptilian eyes remain a portal into a past we cannot fully comprehend, leaving us to wonder, always, what if the world we know is only a fraction of what was? Imagine stepping into a centuries-old English cottage. The floorboards creak underfoot, the firelight flickers across the walls, and the wind whispers through cracks in the windows. Beneath your feet lies a secret. Beneath the very threshold where the front door meets the world outside, someone, long ago, hid a clay bottle. These were not ordinary bottles. Each one was meticulously sealed, carefully positioned, and charged with intent. Archaeologists call them witch bottles, a term that conjures images of magic, fear, and desperation. In their time, these vessels were not mere superstition. They were weapons, shields, and warnings, all at once. Inside, The bottles contained elements that tethered them to the human body. Nails clipped from fingers, hair plucked from the head, strands of menstrual blood. Sometimes pins and needles were added, bent in ways that suggested symbolic piercing. In certain bottles, the contents were even more macabre, fragments of teeth, bone, or other personal relics. To touch one of these bottles was to touch a fragment of someone's fear, someone's determination to protect their family, their livestock, their home. The bottles were repositories of intent, silent, waiting, dangerous. The purpose of the bottles remains partially obscured by time, but scholars have pieced together their dual function. Some were defensive, meant to trap or repel malevolent spirits, curses, or witches who might harm the household. Others were offensive, created to direct harm toward an enemy or rival. One of the most chilling aspects is how personal these items were. By embedding hair, blood, or fragments of a person's body, the witch bottle created a magical link, a tether between the bottle's maker and the target. This link was meant to either absorb a curse, redirect a hex, or bind a spirit to the bottle. In essence, the maker could manipulate forces beyond the physical world using what was once alive. Yet there was always risk. Mishandle a bottle, break its seal, or fail to bury it properly, and the very forces invoked could turn against you. In some villages, the presence of a witch bottle was considered dangerous to outsiders. The bottles themselves were treated as cursed, capable of harming the unwary. Modern archaeologists have unearthed dozens of witch bottles across England, Scotland, and Wales. Many were found under floorboards, inside hearths, or buried in gardens. In one excavation in Norwich, a bottle was discovered beneath the threshold of a 17th-century house. It contained pins, nails, human hair, and a small bone fragment. Chemical analysis revealed traces of blood preserved for centuries within the sealed clay. In another discovery, in a cottage in Kent, a bottle was buried deep in the soil near the fireplace. Inside were over 30 pins, a mixture of human hair and feathers, and a fragment of a baby tooth. The placement suggested defensive magic. The bottle had been hidden where a malevolent spirit might enter the home, perhaps through the chimney or the doorway. The people who made these bottles believed in an unseen world, spirits, witches, demons, and ancestors who could intervene in human affairs. To modern eyes, this world may seem superstitious or absurd, but for them, it was as real as the stones in their hearths or the wind in the trees. Every household had to navigate it carefully, with ritual, fear, and intent intertwined. The prevalence of witch bottles coincided with periods of social instability, disease, and religious upheaval. The 16th and 17th centuries in England were eras of intense anxiety. Plagues swept through towns, famines struck the countryside, and conflicts over religion tore communities apart. Witchcraft accusations rose as fear of unseen forces became inseparable from everyday life. In this climate, witch bottles were both talisman and weapon. They allowed ordinary people, women, men, children, to exert control over forces they could not fully understand. To bury a bottle was to claim agency in a world governed by chance, misfortune, and invisible enemies. Yet the act was also steeped in dread. To work magic required a belief in its potency. To make a bottle was to invite power into your life, power that could protect or destroy. The duality of the bottles mirrored the duality of human existence itself. Hope intertwined with fear, safety intertwined with danger. Every ingredient in a witch bottle carried meaning. Nails pierced through hair symbolized binding or punishment. Blood connected the ritual to the life force of the individual. Pins or sharp objects were thought to trap malevolent spirits or inflict harm on enemies. Bones, teeth, and fragments of clothing created a personal connection to the person targeted by the ritual. Some bottles were sealed with wax, clay, or resin, sometimes painted with symbols to enhance their power. Once prepared, the bottles were buried in strategic locations, under doorways, in hearths, beneath threshold stones, or near wells. Each placement corresponded to a belief about where supernatural forces could enter the home. The careful thought put into these burials demonstrates that even in seemingly mundane households, a high-stakes spiritual battle was taking place. To this day, witch bottles evoke unease. When excavated, they carry the residual intent of their makers, a silent echo of the fear and desperation embedded in their contents. Archaeologists and historians describe a subtle tension when working near them. The air feels heavier, the atmosphere charged, as though the objects remember their purpose. Some of the bottles have been conserved and displayed in museums, their contents meticulously documented. Visitors often comment on an inexplicable feeling that the eyes of the materials within the bottle, the hair, teeth, and nails, are watching them, or that the air around the display is oddly thick. Whether psychological or spiritual, the effect is undeniable. The witch bottles of ancient Britain are more than curiosities. They are tangible evidence that fear, hope, and faith shaped human behavior across centuries. They remind us that magic was never separate from life. It was a tool, a weapon, and a shield. Even ordinary homes, with their wooden beams and stone hearths, were arenas of spiritual warfare. Every threshold could harbor danger, every shadow could conceal an enemy. And within that context, the witch bottles were both a lifeline and a warning. Today, when we unearth these vessels, we are uncovering more than clay, nails, and hair. We are uncovering the anxieties, beliefs, and desperate courage of people long gone. The bottles carry their maker's fear across centuries, a silent testament to the unseen battles fought within walls and beneath floors. Stand before one, peer into its sealed mouth, and you can almost hear the intent trapped inside. The prayers, the threats, the hope, the desperation, all contained within a small clay vessel that has survived fires, floods, and the passage of time. The witch bottles are silent, yet they speak louder than words. Fear never disappears. It waits, buried, watching, and remembered by the objects we leave behind. Even now, centuries later, the bottles continue to carry the energy of those who made them. Their makers are gone, their households vanished, but the fear persists, sealed and silent, waiting to remind us that magic, once invoked, never truly sleeps. In the heart of the Taklamakan Desert, where windblown dunes stretch endlessly beneath a pale, scorching sun, archaeologists uncovered a secret buried for millennia. Beneath the shifting sands lay a cemetery unlike any other in the world. Here, bodies rested as though they had been laid down yesterday, not thousands of years ago. Their skin, preserved by the arid desert air, retained the texture of life, their hair untouched by time, their eyelashes delicate as fine silk. But what was truly astonishing was their appearance. These mummies bore the features of distant lands: high cheekbones, narrow noses, deep-set eyes, and hair shades more common to Europe than to East Asia. Who were these people, and how had they ended up so far from home, in a land seemingly inhospitable to human life? The Tarim Basin, in the far west of China, was not a crossroads anyone would expect thousands of years ago. Yet, these mummies, dated as early as 1800 BCE, challenged conventional narratives of migration, trade, and cultural exchange. Their presence hinted at connections spanning continents, long before the Silk Road would carry goods, ideas, and languages across Eurasia. The burials themselves were deliberate, methodical, and deeply ceremonial. Bodies were wrapped in wool, linen, and sometimes leather, their clothing patterned with intricate designs. Geometric motifs, plaids, and even delicate embroidery appeared on fabrics remarkably preserved, despite the harsh desert climate. Archaeologists noticed that many of the patterns mirrored textiles from regions thousands of miles away: the Caucasus, Central Asia, and even parts of Europe. These garments suggested not only travel but the exchange of knowledge and artistry across vast distances. centuries before historians had imagined such connections. Some mummies were posed with extraordinary care, their limbs arranged to mimic the gestures of life, as though the dead were to remain eternal participants in a ritual world. Buried alongside them were tools, textiles, and sometimes even food, the gestures both practical and symbolic, a belief that the afterlife mirrored the physical one. Their eyes, now darkened with time but still defined, seemed to peer through the millennia, as though trying to communicate their stories to the living who would someday stumble upon them. Yet the mystery deepens when one considers their European features. Genetic studies have confirmed surprising connections. Some mummies share markers with populations far to the west, even in places now considered distant and culturally distinct. How did they journey across deserts and mountains? Were they nomads, traders, exiles, or pioneers seeking lands unknown? And why did they settle here, in a harsh, arid expanse that demands both resilience and ingenuity to survive? Archaeologists have uncovered graves in varying conditions. Some show signs of hurried burials, suggesting deaths during migration or conflict. Others indicate meticulous planning, reflecting long-term settlements where families could prepare ceremonial interments with great care. The juxtaposition of these burials, the hurried and the deliberate, paints a complex picture. Life in the Tarim Basin was precarious, yet meaningful, lived under the weight of survival and cultural expression. The clothing alone tells a story of interconnected worlds. Some robes, woven with precise patterns, carry symbols that resonate with early European cultures, particularly Celtic and Nordic designs. Other fabrics incorporate motifs seen in Central Asian traditions. The implication is staggering. Thousands of years ago, distant peoples were already in contact, sharing knowledge, artistry, and perhaps even belief systems. A European traveler might have walked these deserts, mingling with communities who would come to call this harsh land home, leaving traces of their presence in wool, leather, and the careful wrapping of the dead. The mummies themselves are silent witnesses, but their gazes are arresting. Staring through centuries of sand and dust, they carry the weight of stories untold. Some are male, some female. Some are young, others elderly. All share the uncanny preservation that has made them emblematic of a civilization both foreign and familiar, bridging the gap between East and West in ways history has only begun to understand. Yet preservation is only part of the mystery. Their teeth, bones, and hair tell another story. Analysis of diet reveals a combination of grains, domesticated meats, and plants consistent with both local agriculture and imported resources. Isotope testing shows water sources from distant regions, confirming mobility and trade routes that defy previous assumptions about the era. These were not isolated desert dwellers. They were participants in a network of exchange, culture, and survival that spanned the continent. And then there is the unnerving aspect of their eternal gaze. Unlike mummies preserved artificially in Egypt, these bodies maintain a lifelike quality that unsettles even the most experienced archaeologists. The Taklamakan Desert, relentless in its sun and wind, has acted as both preserver and mirror. The people buried here remain almost as they were in life, their expressions unreadable yet evocative, their eyes fixed as if they knew their resting place would one day be discovered. Those who study them often remark on a feeling of being observed, as though the desert itself has preserved not only the flesh but the spirit, waiting patiently for the world to catch up. What is also remarkable is the evidence of cultural complexity. Some graves reveal items that suggest belief in the afterlife. Miniature models, tools, and containers carefully placed beside the deceased. The attention to ceremonial detail implies a sophisticated understanding of life, death, and perhaps even destiny. In a desert that seems inhospitable, these people were creators of ritual, culture, and memory, leaving behind traces that speak to both their humanity and their mystery. The Tarim Basin mummies are reminders that history is not linear. Civilization was not confined to the cities of Mesopotamia or the valleys of the Yellow River. Peoples migrated, interacted, and shared knowledge in ways we are only beginning to comprehend. The mummy's European features are not anomalies. They are evidence that the human story is more intertwined than textbooks often acknowledge. These travelers, artisans, and survivors left their mark not only in their own time but in the way the desert has held them, frozen yet eloquent, for millennia. Even today, scientists, historians, and curious observers feel the same thrill of discovery as the first archaeologists who dug into the sands. The mummies' preserved hair, the fine embroidery of their garments, the careful placement of their bodies all convey a story of human resilience and ingenuity. And yet, there is a sense of unease, a subtle whisper carried by the desert wind. These were strangers in a strange land, yet they belonged. They left behind a world that is part myth, part history, part ghost. To stand before one of these mummies is to confront the vast, unknowable past. You can see the deliberate care in burial, the artistry in clothing, the survival of hair, skin, and bone. You can feel the desert's embrace, the centuries of isolation, and the strange mobility of these people who defy expectations. And you can sense that their story is unfinished, that the desert holds secrets still unrevealed, waiting for the patient observer to piece together fragments of identity, migration, and survival. The frozen gazes of the Tarim Basin mummies cut through centuries of sand, desert, wind, and time. They challenge assumptions, provoke curiosity, and haunt the imagination. Who were they? Where did they come from? What did they carry in their hearts as they journeyed across unknown lands? And why did they choose or were forced to rest here? Perhaps we will never fully know. But in their preservation, in the meticulous wrapping of their bodies, in the patterned textiles and personal effects left behind, the mummies speak across millennia. They are a testament to human adaptability, the mysteries of migration, and the eerie continuity of life in the harshest of environments. And as we peer into their lifeless yet lifelike eyes, we are reminded that history is not merely recorded in texts or ruins, but in the faces of those who lived, traveled, and endured, whose presence lingers far longer than we can imagine. The desert has preserved them, the sands have protected them, and now, thousands of years later, their silent story reaches us. Their frozen gazes cut through time, unflinching, challenging us to reconsider the scope of ancient human experience and to wonder at the journeys, hardships, and mysteries that lie buried beneath deserts, mountains, and rivers alike. The Tarim Basin mummies are not just bodies, they are questions, waiting for answers that may never come. And in their eternal stillness they continue to haunt the imagination of anyone who dares to look, reminding us that the ancient world was far stranger and perhaps far more terrifying than we ever imagined. In mist-shrouded forests and along the rolling hills of ancient Europe, a practice both feared and revered took place, the collection of human heads. The Celts, whose villages dotted the landscape from the British Isles to the heart of Gaul, treated these skulls not merely as trophies of war, but as vessels containing the essence of life itself. Written accounts from Roman observers describe the ghastly sight heads displayed on stakes or hung in shrines, their eyes hollow, their features frozen in death. These were not mere reminders of conquest. They were sacred, imbued with meaning, and treated with a ritualistic precision that confounded outsiders. Archaeological evidence confirms what the chronicles hint at. Skulls recovered from Celtic settlements reveal traces of resin, carefully applied, sometimes even colored or lacquered. The preservation was deliberate, meant to maintain the appearance, and, crucially, the spirit of the deceased. Roman soldiers, who often underestimated the depth of Celtic spirituality, could not comprehend the reverence with which these communities handled the heads of their enemies. To the Celts, the head was the seat of the soul, the focal point of a person's vitality. Taking a head was not merely an act of domination, it was capturing life itself, an eternal witness to both defeat and devotion. Imagine a Celtic warrior returning from battle, the forest echoing with the screams and clamor of conflict fading behind him. In his hands is the severed head of a rival chieftain. He carries it not only as proof of his victory but as a source of power. In placing it on a shrine, or suspending it from a branch where the sun and wind will reach it, he enacts a ritual that binds the soul of the defeated to the living world. Resin is applied to the skull, sealing it, preserving it against decay, allowing the spirit to linger, watching and reminding all who pass of the balance between life, death, and the forces beyond. Roman historians, particularly Julius Caesar in his accounts of the Gallic Wars, were both horrified and fascinated. He writes of shrines lined with hundreds of heads, of warriors exhuming them from the battlefield and bringing them home. To outsiders, this was barbaric, grotesque, even sacrilegious. Yet for the Celts themselves, it was a deeply spiritual act. They believed that the soul of a person resided within the head. To possess it was to harness its power, to honor it, and to protect the community from harm. Every skull was a vessel, every shrine a testament to the intermingling of fear, respect, and ritual. Excavations in regions such as Brittany and the Upper Rhine have unearthed skulls showing remarkable treatment. Resin traces suggest deliberate preservation techniques. Some display evidence of careful cleaning and even smoothing of the bone. Certain skulls were mounted with metal or wooden fittings, intended to secure them in place on stakes or in shrines. The meticulous care demonstrates a profound belief in the sanctity and enduring potency of the human head. These were not hasty gestures born of impulse, but meticulously executed acts steeped in spirituality and tradition. But there is also an intimate, terrifying human element. Skulls were sometimes decorated with carvings or pigments, enhancing their appearance for ritual purposes. The eyes, now empty, seemed to stare even in death, silent witnesses to a world that revered the boundary between the living and the dead. To the modern observer, this evokes unease. To the Celts, it evoked power. Each preserved head served as a bridge between worlds, a point where the earthly and the spiritual intersected. The practice of head collection also extended beyond enemies. Certain prominent or revered members of a community, including druids or leaders, might have their own heads ritually prepared after death, enshrined to watch over the living. In this context, the skull was a guardian, a protector whose gaze endured long after flesh and sinew had returned to the earth. Resin and ceremonial treatment ensured the skull's integrity, not as an object of horror, but as a vessel of vigilance. Even in battle, the head served as a symbol. Warriors sought them not only for status but to absorb strength. Some historical sources describe the act of taking a head as a means of capturing the courage, wisdom, or skill of a fallen opponent. The Celts were deeply attuned to the idea that energy and spirit could reside in physical form, and that objects, even skulls, could mediate power. Resin, lacquer, and care were not vanity. They were deliberate methods to ensure that this power remained potent and accessible. Consider for a moment a shrine in a Celtic village. Skulls of generations line the walls, resin gleaming faintly in the torchlight, catching shadows that flicker like dancing spirits. Children grow up beneath their watch, learning the tales of valor and honor. Travelers passing through feel a subtle weight in the air, a presence that is not merely metaphorical but felt in the quiet and in the small hairs on the back of the neck. The skulls are silent, yet in their stillness lies an undeniable presence, the echo of rituals, battles, and the firm belief that death is never truly the end. Modern science has confirmed aspects that ancient observers only intuited. Certain skulls exhibit modifications such as filing of teeth, deliberate reshaping of the cranium, and patterns of resin application that suggest intentional symbolic meaning. These techniques reinforce the idea that head-taking was ritualistic, not random, and that each skull carried unique significance based on its history, the status of the individual, and the circumstances of its preservation. The psychological impact of this practice on the Celts themselves must have been profound. To live among the preserved heads of enemies and ancestors alike was to exist in a world where the boundary between life and death was permeable, where vigilance and respect were constant necessities. The spiritual ecology of Celtic life, as expressed through these skulls, reflects a society intimately aware of mortality, yet determined to harness the forces of the beyond for protection, guidance, and continuity. Even now, when modern archaeologists unearth these relics, the effect is visceral. The resonate-smoothed skulls, lined in shrines or found in isolated ritual contexts, carry a weight that is not merely historical. They transmit the intent, fear, and reverence of a culture that understood the enduring potency of life preserved in bone. Staring into their hollow sockets, one cannot help but feel a shiver, a connection across millennia to a worldview where the soul and the essence of life truly dwelled within the human head. The practice may have faded as Christianity and other societal shifts transformed Europe, but the echoes remain. Every preserved skull tells a story, a testament to the profound understanding and respect the Celts had for the forces of life and death. The duality of horror and reverence embedded in these relics reminds us that humanity has always sought to navigate mortality through ritual, preservation, and symbolism. The severed heads of the Celts are more than relics of a barbaric past. They are emissaries of belief, vessels of intent, guardians of communities, and enduring witnesses to the spiritual imagination of a people long vanished. Their resin-coated surfaces reflect light as if remembering torch flames, their hollow eyes stare across centuries, and their silent presence carries the weight of a worldview both alien and hauntingly human. In standing before one of these skulls, one glimpses a culture deeply entwined with the mysteries of life, death, and spirit. They challenge modern assumptions about what is sacred and what is terrifying. They remind us that, for the Celts, the boundary between the living and the dead was not an abstraction but a tangible, preserved reality, a truth held in resin, bone, and reverent hands. And so, in every silent skull, the ritual echoes, the soul lives on, captured in bone, preserved in resin, staring across centuries, challenging us to remember that even in death, life persists, haunting, protective, and eternal. In the rolling hills of northern Greece, near the Strymon River, lies a mound that commands attention, unlike any other in the region. Its contours rise gently yet defiantly against the landscape, a silent guardian of secrets long buried beneath layers of soil, stone, and time. Archaeologists first began to study the site at Amphipolis in the early 21st century, and what they uncovered stunned the world. A colossal tomb, vast beyond expectation, built with monumental precision and scale. Marble walls towered, decorated with intricate reliefs of sphinxes, caryatids, and warriors whose gaze seemed to follow any intruder daring to step inside. The question that has haunted historians, scholars, and visitors alike is simple yet profound. Who could command such grandeur? A king? A general? A figure of myth? Or someone whose deeds were so monumental they transcended their mortality? Every step inside the tomb suggests intention and reverence beyond measure. The architecture itself whispering of the power, ambition, and influence of its occupant. Every relief, every carved detail, seems to have been designed not only to honor life but to assert a presence that would endure long after flesh and bone had returned to dust. Yet the tomb, despite its immense size and lavish design, holds a cruel and tantalizing secret. When the archaeologists finally penetrated its depths, they found it empty. The central chamber, capable of housing coffins, sarcophagi, and treasures beyond imagination, held nothing. Was it looted in antiquity, stripped of its riches by grave robbers with audacious precision? Or was it never filled at all, a monument intended more for mystery than for memorial? The emptiness is as compelling as any treasure. It creates tension, as if the tomb itself is asking questions it will never answer. Imagine walking through the long corridor leading to the inner chamber. The marble floors echo softly beneath your steps, your torchlight or flashlight flickering against the carved walls. Every relief tells a story. Sphinxes poised in silent judgment, warriors frozen in eternal vigilance, caryatids whose eyes follow you as you move forward. And yet, despite the grandeur, there is a hollow emptiness, a silence that weighs heavier than stone. The tomb seems to mock the living, daring you to confront the unknown, challenging you to imagine the occupant, the rituals, the ceremonies that might have taken place here. The amphory, mosaics, and marble panels offer clues, fragments of a narrative never fully revealed. Some suggest that the tomb was constructed during the late classical period, around the time of Alexander the Great, which has fueled speculation that it might have been intended for one of his generals, a family member, or even a forgotten hero of history. The lion-headed figures at the entrance symbolize courage and protection, yet their vigilance could not prevent the erasure of memory, leaving only the grandeur of the architecture behind. Despite its emptiness, the tomb speaks with clarity about human ambition. Its builders invested tremendous labor, precision, and artistry, crafting a structure designed to endure centuries, to awe those who would come after. Every block of marble was positioned with meticulous care, every carving chosen to convey power, honor, and transcendence. The empty chamber is a paradox. It celebrates an absence, monumental in its mystery, commanding respect not for what is contained within, but for what is intentionally or inevitably missing. Excavators discovered traces of plaster, pigment, and remnants of frescoes that hint at color long faded by time. Gold leaf may have once adorned key details. Architectural fragments suggest that the tomb's interior was as lavish as its exterior. Scholars debate the iconography sphinxes representing guardians of the afterlife, caryatids embodying grace and vigilance, warriors immortalized in stone, and yet none can say definitively whom these tributes honor. The tomb is a riddle, a puzzle of stone and marble, inviting interpretation but withholding certainty. Some theories suggest that the tomb was intended for someone of immense symbolic importance rather than practical authority. Perhaps it was constructed as a monument to an idea of victory, legacy, devotion, or power, rather than a burial for a single person. The very scale of the structure dwarfs typical funerary architecture of the period, suggesting that the ambition behind it extended beyond the mortal coil. Its emptiness may not be an accident. It may be part of the message, a deliberate choice to honor mystery itself. Walking through the corridors today, one is struck by the stillness. The silence is deep, almost oppressive, as if the tomb is actively preserving its secrets. Dust drifts lazily in shafts of sunlight that pierce small openings in the walls, and the air is heavy with centuries of human intention. The walls, though carved and polished, seem to hum with residual energy, the memory of countless hands that labored, chisels striking marble, artists refining every detail to perfection. Every surface tells a story of devotion, skill, and the human desire to transcend mortality. And yet, the tomb is haunted by what it does not contain. It is the tension between expectation and reality that makes Amphipolis so compelling. We expect tombs to hold bodies, relics, or treasure. Yet this one defies that instinct, creating a psychological weight that persists long after leaving the site. The emptiness becomes part of the narrative. It is as though the tomb itself has chosen to remain silent, to challenge every visitor, to confront uncertainty, to ponder the nature of memory, loss, and human ambition. Even the architectural innovations suggest a mind attuned to both grandeur and psychological impact. The massive marble blocks, the intricate reliefs, the symmetry and alignment of chambers all were crafted to impress, to intimidate, to inspire awe. Yet all of it directs the gaze inward, toward absence. Every monumental feature underscores what is not there. The tomb's emptiness is as central to its meaning as the walls themselves. In this sense, Amphipolis becomes a meditation on mortality, memory, and the fragility of human expectation. Visitors and archaeologists alike often report a subtle emotional resonance. Standing in the central chamber, one senses both the immense labor required to create it and the intangible presence of those who intended it. It is as though the tomb itself is aware of the curiosity it inspires, maintaining an eternal dialogue with the living. The emptiness is not nihilistic, it is contemplative, demanding reflection on what is remembered, what is forgotten, and the impermanence of even the grandest human endeavor. The nameless tomb of Amphipolis reminds us that history is not only about what is preserved, but also about what is lost or withheld. In its emptiness, it conveys lessons about human ambition, mortality, and the desire to leave an enduring mark. Its monumental scale communicates reverence, awe, and perhaps even fear. Fear of death, fear of obscurity, and fear of the unknown. The tomb, in this sense, becomes a mirror, reflecting both the ambitions of its builders and the curiosity of those who would come centuries later to seek answers. Even now, the mound stands sentinel over the surrounding hills, a monument to enigma and human endeavor. Archaeologists continue to excavate, debate, and speculate, yet the tomb retains its mysteries. What was its purpose? Who commissioned it? Was it robbed or never occupied? Each unanswered question adds layers to its story, drawing visitors and scholars alike into a dialogue across millennia. The nameless tomb does not simply contain history. It contains questions, tension, and the haunting suggestion that some monuments are meant not for men, but for mystery itself. As the sun sets over the hills of Amphipolis, shadows stretch across the marble walls, emphasizing the vast emptiness within. The corridors seem longer, the reliefs more vigilant, and the still air resonates with a silent echo of absence. The tomb waits, patient, monumental, enigmatic, a testament not to what has been buried, but to what cannot be fully known. Its empty chamber is a paradox, commanding attention without content, awe without resolution, presence without form. The nameless tomb of Amphipolis stands as a reminder that sometimes the greatest monuments are designed not to house bodies, treasures, or artifacts, but to preserve questions, evoke wonder, and confront the living with the weight of the unknown. Even in its emptiness, it speaks across centuries, challenging us to reflect on ambition, mortality, and the haunting power of mystery. The empty chamber still waits, echoing with absence, inviting every visitor to contemplate not only the grandeur of the past but the enduring enigma of human intent. Beneath the mist-laden fields of the Netherlands, where peat bogs stretch like endless black mirrors reflecting gray skies, archaeologists uncovered a secret the Earth had been holding for 2 millennia. Within the spongy, acidic depths lay the body of a teenage girl, preserved with a haunting perfection that defies time. Her small frame was intact, her skin tanned to a deep, leathery bronze by the chemical embrace of the bog, and her hair, though brittle, remained in its long, dark strands. She had been given a name by modern science, White Girl, but even now, she exists more as a presence than a person, a silent witness to rituals long lost to history. The tension of her discovery lies not only in her preservation but in the details of her death. A thin rope was still looped tightly around her neck, a subtle, almost invisible binding that spoke of a sudden, deliberate end. Her hands rested at her sides, fingers uncurled, as though accepting a fate imposed from forces beyond her understanding. Her eyes were closed, forever, creating a chilling sense of calm that contrasts with the violence implied by the rope. The bog had been both tomb and preservative, a slow, chemical cradle that held her body in stasis, freezing the final moments of her life for the world to discover millennia later. Scientific analysis deepened the mystery. Isotopes in her bones and teeth revealed that Yida Girl had been healthy, well-fed, and part of a community that had access to adequate nutrition. She was not an outcast, nor impoverished. She had grown up with care, laughter, and routine, all the markers of a normal life in her Iron Age village. And yet, despite this, she had been chosen for sacrifice. Was it her community that selected her, or an authority figure within it? Was she willing, resigned, terrified? The bog offers no answers to these intimate questions, only the chilling evidence of her final act or the act performed upon her. To step into the bog is to step into an otherworldly landscape, where waterlogged moss muffles footsteps and mist coils in the air like living fingers. The peat is treacherous beneath bare feet, soft and yielding, swallowing prints as quickly as they are made. It is a liminal space, neither fully land nor fully water, perfectly suited to ancient rites that sought to bridge the earthly and the spiritual. Bogs across northern Europe were long associated with offerings to gods, spirits, or natural forces, and Yidi Girl's burial is a stark, tangible link to this forgotten practice. The method of her death strangulation is grim but precise. She was not stabbed, bludgeoned, or otherwise mutilated. The rope, likely tied with ritual care, ended her life swiftly, though the psychological and spiritual implications were far more complex. In Iron Age belief systems, such sacrifices were not mere executions, they were exchanges. Life for life, human vitality offered to appease deities, ensure the fertility of crops, or safeguard a community from calamity. Eid Girl's sacrifice may have been intended to calm a god of swamps, to prevent floods, or to guarantee bountiful harvests. She was a conduit between the human and the divine, a fragile vessel whose death was meant to preserve life around her. Archaeologists have found hundreds of similar bog bodies across northern Europe, yet few are as compelling as Yidi Girl. The chemical composition of peat preserves soft tissue, hair, nails, and even clothing fragments in a way that ordinary burial cannot. Her clothing, likely wool and linen, had largely decayed, yet traces remain, hinting at the fabrics and dyes of the period. Tiny beads or remnants of jewelry sometimes survive, suggesting that even in sacrifice, the individual's identity was recognized, honored, or perhaps embellished for ritual purposes. In Yidi Girl's case, the purity and intactness of her body transform her from a scientific specimen into a ghostly interlocutor with a culture we can no longer fully comprehend. Modern science, through forensic reconstruction, has given her a face, a presence that is almost unsettlingly human. Her features are delicate, high cheekbones, a small nose, and lips that suggest a fleeting smile, frozen in time. Yet this serenity is deceptive. It masks a violent end, an imposition of death that is at once cruel and sacred. To gaze upon Yidi Girl is to confront the paradox of ritual, the intersection of care and cruelty, devotion and destruction, reverence and violation. She embodies both horror and transcendence, a bridge between the living and the spiritual, the historical and the eternal. The psychological resonance of bog sacrifices is profound. In life, the victim was often revered, elevated above ordinary villagers for their role in a ritual that transcended individual existence. Their death was framed not as a loss, but as a contribution to cosmic balance. Yet, for modern observers, this creates tension between admiration for the ritual's purpose and horror at its execution. Yidi Girl exists in this tension, a preserved tableau of human belief and human cost, her small body carrying the weight of cultural priorities that are both alien and oddly familiar. Consider the environmental context. The bog itself is a living participant in this story. Its acidity, low oxygen levels, and cold temperatures create a perfect preservative, slowly tanning flesh and neutralizing decomposition. Each layer of peat that settled over her body added a new level of protection, a slow, chemical embrace that would lock her in time for centuries. The landscape is not passive. It collaborates with ritual and chance, transforming what would have been an ordinary death into an extraordinary preservation, a silent testimony to the intersection of nature, culture, and fate. Even the rope itself speaks volumes. Modern forensic study shows subtle wear patterns, and the way it is tied suggests ritual precision rather than casual violence. It may have been fastened with knots familiar to the community's spiritual leaders, a symbol as much as a tool. The positioning of her body straight, arms at her sides, implies a conscious attempt to honor form, to maintain dignity even in death. In a world where death could be violent, arbitrary, and cruel, Yidi Girl's deposition was deliberate, controlled, and laden with spiritual meaning. As the centuries passed, the bog kept her secrets. Farmers draining the peat, archaeologists digging carefully through layers of history, and casual observers stepping through mossy fields could not disturb what nature had so meticulously preserved. When modern science finally uncovered her, she emerged as both object of study and evocative symbol, an adolescent girl whose life ended abruptly, yet whose death continues to speak across millennia. Eidgirl's story forces reflection on broader human behaviors. Across cultures, sacrifice is a recurring motif, a mechanism to negotiate uncertainty, invoke favor, or mediate between mortal life and supernatural authority. Yet bog sacrifices are uniquely tangible. Here, history and science converge in a single body. The preserved flesh, the tension of the rope, the calm of her expression, all communicate something intangible about the beliefs, fears, and priorities of a culture long vanished. In her, the abstract becomes corporeal, the ritual becomes intimate, and the dead continue to instruct the living in ways that books and artifacts alone cannot convey. And yet, for all her preservation, Eidgirl is ultimately unknowable. We can study isotopes, recreate her appearance, infer her diet and health, but we cannot enter her mind, feel her fear, or understand her consent. Was she resigned? Did she understand the importance of her sacrifice? Was she chosen for her beauty, health, or status? These questions linger, unresolved, echoing across the boggy landscape and through the centuries, drawing modern observers into the same web of tension that surrounded her in life. Standing before the peat where she was found, one feels an uncanny presence. The bog seems to breathe, the mist curling like smoke above the black water, reeds whispering as if carrying her voice. It is a landscape suspended between worlds living and dead, past and present, human and divine. In this space, Eidgirl's body is not merely an archaeological find, but a participant in a dialogue with eternity. The peat is her cocoon, the rope her emblem of ritual, and her peaceful, tanned face a mask over a violent end that challenges our assumptions about sacrifice, spirituality, and mortality. She reminds us that history is not only what is recorded in scrolls or inscribed on stone, but what is preserved in bodies, landscapes, and the quiet endurance of human intention. Eidgirl is both victim and emissary, offering insight into a culture that valued spiritual exchange above individual preservation, into a world where death could serve a purpose beyond the self. And so, her presence lingers. Even now, as modern science deciphers isotopes and studies her physiology, she transcends her physical form. The bog has preserved her, yes, but it has also preserved the story, the tension, the mystery of a life offered to the forces of nature and deity. Her peaceful face, with eyes forever closed, belies the violence of her fate, yet communicates a resonance that is impossible to ignore, a haunting whisper that connects us to a time, a culture, and a human experience long gone, yet never truly absent. Eidgirl remains a reminder that in history, in ritual, and in the embrace of nature, life and death are never simple. Her preserved body speaks across centuries, telling of choices made or imposed, and of a human understanding of the world that intertwines reverence, fear, and sacrifice. In the dark, quiet stillness of a Dutch bog, she continues to watch, to teach, and to haunt, reminding us that some secrets, though ancient, are eternally present. On the wind-swept cliffs of Easter Island, where waves crash against volcanic rock and the horizon stretches into endless Pacific blue, fragments of an ancient civilization whisper across centuries. These whispers are not spoken aloud, nor are they etched in the massive statues that dominate the landscape. Instead, they exist in the delicate carvings of wooden tablets, inscribed with a script known as Rongorongo. Tiny, mysterious glyphs twist and curl along the surfaces, symbols that resemble birds, plants, humans, and abstract geometric shapes, forming a language that has stubbornly resisted all attempts at interpretation. The very existence of Rongorongo is eerie. Unlike most writing systems, it appears suddenly in history with no clear evolutionary precedent. There are no surviving records to explain its origin. Some scholars speculate that it was developed independently on the island, a rare example of a script arising in isolation. Others suggest it may have been inspired by external contact, perhaps from Polynesian voyagers who carried knowledge from distant lands. Whatever the truth, the glyphs present a haunting puzzle, a civilization speaking in a tongue we may never understand, leaving messages encoded in wood, enigmatic and unyielding. The tension surrounding Rongorongo is deepened by tragedy. When European missionaries arrived on the island in the 19th century, they regarded these inscriptions as pagan relics, threatening to erase the native culture. Many tablets were burned in zeal or destroyed through neglect, leaving only a handful of surviving examples. Today, roughly 24 fragments and boards remain, their wood darkened by age, cracked by climate, and inscribed with symbols whose meanings slip perpetually out of reach. These surviving boards are fragile, kept under glass in museums or carefully preserved by scholars, yet their whispering presence evokes a sense of both awe and loss. To gaze upon a Rongorongo tablet is to step into a mind that thought differently, whose priorities, stories, and spiritual practices are largely inaccessible to us. The glyphs twist along the wood in patterns that hint at narrative, ritual, or mnemonic function. Some appear in repeated sequences, suggesting lists or prayers. Others seem to spiral in complex loops, implying cyclical ideas or cosmological understanding. The tactile presence of these carvings is striking, each cut made by human hand, each groove worn by centuries of handling, each edge revealing the patience, care, and reverence of those who inscribed them. The process of writing Rongorongo itself adds to the mystery. The tablets are carved in shallow relief, often on thin wood planks that were soft enough to cut, yet durable enough to last centuries. Scholars note that the writing flows in a unique style called boustrophedon, alternating direction, line by line, top to bottom, left to right, then right to left. This unusual format complicates interpretation and signals a cognitive framework distinct from most other scripts. It is as though the mind that conceived Rongorongo was deliberately weaving complexity into form, a conscious choice to encode thought in a pattern that challenges the reader and preserves secrecy. What were these symbols meant to convey? Some researchers hypothesize that Rongorongo was used to record genealogies, sacred chants, astronomical observations, or even esoteric knowledge about the island's rituals. Others suggest it may have contained incantations to the gods, instructions for ceremonies, or historical accounts meant for select individuals who understood the code. Every hypothesis, however, is shadowed by the reality that most tablets were destroyed, leaving no Rosetta Stone, no cipher key, no contextual clues strong enough to confirm their meaning. The result is a script that is simultaneously tangible and unknowable, carved words that speak only in silence. The destruction of the tablets by missionaries is a tragedy that haunts our understanding of Easter Island. Where once the entire population may have been literate in this enigmatic language, now only fragments survive, orphaned from their cultural context. The act of burning and discarding the tablets did more than erase wood. It severed a direct connection to thought, belief, and history. The voices of the islanders, encoded in each glyph, were silenced, leaving archaeologists, linguists, and historians to speculate and reconstruct from a handful of shards. The loss is felt, not only academically but spiritually. The island itself, once a vibrant center of communication and ritual, is left with echoes instead of sound. Yet the few surviving boards continue to captivate. Scholars who study them report an almost uncanny sense of presence, as if the glyphs themselves are aware of the modern gaze upon them. Light playing across the carved surfaces casts shadows that mimic the curvature of the figures, creating a subtle animation that seems to breathe life into the wood. The tactile texture invites the imagination. One can almost feel the weight of the hands that carved them, the rhythm of the woodcutter's tools, and the intense concentration required to create something meant to endure through generations. Each tablet is a portal, fragile yet resilient, carrying forward fragments of a mind, a culture, a civilization. Modern attempts to decipher Rongorongo are both promising and maddening. Statistical analysis, pattern recognition software, and comparisons with Polynesian chants and myths have suggested potential linguistic structures, but none are conclusive. Some sequences seem to correspond to lunar or solar cycles, hinting at astronomical observation. Others appear ritualistic, tied to ceremonies long lost. Yet every theory is tempered by uncertainty, as each tablet is incomplete, the gaps in the corpus forcing scholars to rely on conjecture as much as evidence. In this way, Rongorongo is a perpetual enigma, a code designed to resist full understanding, or perhaps a code that can only be unlocked within the cultural mind that produced it. The aesthetic of Rongorongo is as haunting as its mystery. Each glyph curves and bends with a rhythm that is both deliberate and organic, sometimes resembling human forms, sometimes animals, sometimes abstract shapes that defy easy interpretation. Viewed in sunlight or lamplight, shadows emphasize the depth of the carvings, giving the symbols a three-dimensional quality that seems almost alive. The effect is hypnotic. Eyes follow the lines, fingers trace the grooves, and the mind drifts into speculation about their meaning. The surviving boards are not mere historical artifacts. They are conduits of wonder, fear, and imagination, connecting modern observers to a thought world irrevocably altered by time and human intervention. The broader context of Easter Island amplifies this mystery. The Rongorongo tablets existed alongside the Moai statues, those monumental monoliths that continue to inspire awe and speculation. Both represent extraordinary feats of human ingenuity and creativity, yet both are layered with uncertainty. Where the Moai express presence and authority through colossal scale, Rongorongo conveys subtlety and intellect through intricate symbols. Together, they form a dual language of expression, one monumental, one delicate, revealing a civilization capable of both physical and cognitive sophistication, yet one whose voice was nearly extinguished by historical calamities. Even now, the remaining tablets evoke a profound sense of loss. Scholars handle them with gloves and care, protecting fragile wood against humidity, light, and decay. Every line, every carved figure, is a reminder of what was nearly forgotten, and yet, in that fragility lies power. The tablets communicate that human expression, even when threatened by time and destruction, can persist, leaving traces that resonate across millennia. The surviving boards whisper not answers but questions about society, belief, language, and the resilience of memory itself. The haunting aspect of Rongorongo is amplified by what it represents: silenced voices. A civilization, brilliant and intricate, capable of recording thought in durable symbols, reduced to a few incomplete artifacts. The glyphs remind us that history is fragile, that human knowledge can be lost in a single generation, and that some messages may remain forever beyond reach. Their mystery lingers in museums, in research papers, and in the imagination of anyone who dares to study them. The silent tablets are not empty, they are full of intent, thought, and a persistent ghostly communication from a culture that once thrived in isolation. In holding a Rongorongo tablet, one cannot help but feel a connection across time. The tool of the carver in hand, the sound of the tool cutting into wood, the breath of the person leaning over the board, the intent to record, preserve, or invoke. These are gestures of permanence and fragility intertwined, actions meant to survive and speak to the future. Yet the survival is partial, the speech fragmented, leaving a haunting tension between what is known and what can never be fully understood. And so, the tablets continue to whisper, their language lost but their presence undeniable. Even in silence, they exert a quiet power, reminding us that civilizations can vanish, scripts can be silenced, and entire systems of thought can disappear, yet the faint echoes of human expression endure. The surviving Rongorongo boards are more than artifacts. They are messengers from a world we cannot fully comprehend. Symbols of intellect, devotion, and the inexorable passage of time. The story of Rongorongo is a story of wonder, tragedy, and unresolved mystery. The symbols carved by human hands are reminders of the ephemeral nature of culture, the fragility of memory, and the endurance of human creativity. They are a testament to the fact that some voices, though nearly silenced, continue to reach across centuries, speaking not in words we can decipher, but in presence, form, and intent. The surviving boards whisper still, insistent and haunting, leaving us with the knowledge that some histories are destined to remain forever enigmatic. Even now, as the wind sweeps across the volcanic cliffs of Easter Island, carrying salt spray and fog, the glyphs seem to shimmer in the half-light. Shadows twist across the carved lines, and for a moment, the symbols seem to move, alive with meaning just out of reach. They are reminders of a civilization that thrived, thought, recorded, and left messages that will never be fully understood. And yet, in their silence, in their quiet persistence, they continue to haunt, whispering across oceans and centuries, speaking to all who dare to listen. Rongorongo remains a testament to the power and fragility of human expression. It reminds us that knowledge is not guaranteed to endure, that some voices will be lost, and that some mysteries will remain beyond reach. The tablets are fragile, incomplete, and indecipherable. Yet in their ghostly presence lies an enduring message. A civilization once spoke, thought, and recorded its world, and even in silence, it continues to leave its mark. The boards whisper still, a voice we cannot fully hear, a story we cannot fully know, yet a presence impossible to ignore.